my privilege and pleasure to invite you all on behalf of KIT-CIII for organizing a webinar on Introduction to Artificial Intelligence with MATLAB, exclusive for KIT students. First of all, I wholeheartedly thank our management, principal, vice principal, deans and HODs of various departments for supporting us to conduct the events. A special thanks to our Dean KIT-CIII, Dr. K. Mahalakshmi ma'am, for organizing this event. I hope definitely it will be useful for all of you. Now I welcome our Dean, Dr. K. Mahalakshmi ma'am, to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Kirtika. And I join hands with Kirtika in welcoming Dr. Spandana and Mr. Vinay for the day. And welcome you all, students, faculty, friends. Good morning. It's really happy to introduce Dr. Spandana. She is an educational technical evangelist at MathWorks India. She works with faculty members and researchers across India to enable effective use of MATLAB and Simulink in their curriculum and research. She specializes in data analytics, mathematical modeling, machine learning, and deep learning workflows using MATLAB. Prior to MathWorks, she studied smart actuating systems using mathematical models for her PhD research. She graduated with a PhD in chemical and biomolecular engineering from National University of Singapore and BTech in chemical engineering from National Institute of Technology, Karnataka. Her agenda for the day will be introducing to machine learning with the examples in regression, machine learning, and image classification with deep learning. And a case study touched upon autonomous driving, agriculture, predictive maintenance for mechanical engineering. It's indeed great pleasure to have you, Dr. Sprandana, and our students will definitely make the maximum use of it with the interactive session. Over to you, Dr. Sprandana.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, ma'am. I hope my audio is clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon, good morning to all the participants and the Dean. Thank you for your kind introduction. Here at MathWorks, I've been working for about 2 years and I've been working on the data analysis and AI side of things. As mentioned by Dr. Mahalakshmi, my background is in chemical engineering, where I studied smart actuating systems, basically hydrogel based systems, and studied them using mathematical models. And at MathWorks, I've been looking at data analytics related workflows. Here with me, I have Mr. Vinay Subramanya, and who is the sales account manager for KIT. So now let's get started. Let's jump right into the agenda of today's session. We'll be looking at an introduction to AI and what are the components of AI, like machine learning and deep learning, and then we'll look at some challenges that exist in the space and what solutions MathWorks provides. So first and foremost, this is a buzzword. AI is a very big buzzword that all of you must have heard about for quite long. And what exactly is AI? The basic definition of AI was first coined in 1950s, and AI was defined as the capability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. But where it gets interesting is when machine can not just imitate but match or exceed human performance. This gives us the opportunity to offload repetitive tasks or to even get computers to do jobs in a much safe and efficient way than humans can. Now, practically speaking, when people say AI today, they almost always mean that they are achieving those results by training a machine to learn a specific behavior. So, how can you train a machine to learn a specific behavior? In traditional programming, this was the way we could get things done, right? Like there's a computer, you feed in data, and then you write a program, and the computer will present you with an output. This is the traditional approach that most of us are familiar with, how you write a program, the computer processes the data and produces an output. But of late, in AI, what has happened is we have sort of interchanged the output and the program with an approach called machine learning. This is flipped around. You feed the data and the desired output, and the computer can write the program for you. And there are even some more techniques where you don't need to know the output, just the data, and the computer can figure out the patterns in that data. So, how exactly is this possible, and what are the typical applications if you can get a computer to understand and make sense of data by itself? So, let's see where it is being currently used in today's time. It has become quite pervasive, really, and these are some of the examples of applications where machine learning has enabled the performance that would have been very difficult to achieve with traditional modeling techniques. So let's look at the characteristics of these problems that make them a very good fit for machine learning techniques, especially problems like speech recognition or object recognition, and say in predictive maintenance. So to give an example, you must have heard about Siri, Alexa, these kind of tools which can automatically recognize what you are speaking and also give a sensible output, right? Similarly, in autonomous driving world, um, images or videos, images with respect to like say vehicles need to be identified. And in the predictive maintenance world, machine learning models are being used to predict, say, an aircraft engine's maintenance schedule. So these are some of the typical applications. So the first thing that machine learning can do is, if the solution is too complex for handwritten rule or equation, say, for example, in speech recognition, there's no specific handwritten equation that if the speech is this, then give an output of this type. So when the solution becomes too complex for handwritten rules or equation, machine learning is being used. That means machine learning models can learn complex nonlinear relationships. And in the second part, where you have newer data that's coming in and your model needs to adapt with this changing data, for example in weather forecasting or say in stock market prediction, what happens is you have new data that is being generated almost every day, and you will have to take this new data in to build your model. So your solution, the machine learning model, should be able to adapt with your changing data. That means it should update as more data becomes available. And the third aspect is that the solution also needs to scale. That is, say for example, if you are working or if you are looking at analytics where you have a lot of data that is coming in, and you'll have to apply a model that you've built for one particular data set into other data sets, and also to say other geography or other applications, your machine learning model should be able to efficiently scale on large data sets. So just give me a moment while I just fix my second monitor and get back.
I think there is a small technical glitch. We'll come back, madam.
Is my screen
Sorry.
visible now?
Spandana, yes, it is visible now.
Okay, thank you so much. So these are the three patterns that we looked at when we were talking about when to use machine learning. So First thing is your machine learning model can learn very complex nonlinear relationships. So if your problem is not very complex, where you can just hard code your logic into your program, then perhaps you don't need to use machine learning. But if your problem is very complex, where you have a number of patterns that are very difficult to hand code, in that case you can make use of machine learning models. And the second aspect we were looking at was when your solution needs to adapt with changing data, and then you'll need to the solution also needs to scale, right? So say for example, if you go to Google Maps, you can predict what the traffic density would be for tomorrow. So how do you think this works? So it has collected a lot of data over a large period of time, and we are Google is perhaps running analytics on that data to make predictions on what the traffic density in a particular place will be tomorrow. And this prediction is not just limited to one specific geography. They have scaled it to almost all the roads in the world. So their solution had to be something that could be scaled easily. So let's see some examples of where this machine learning was used, and some customers who have made use of AI techniques, especially in the agriculture space. So, so this is one company application here is precision agriculture. You must have heard this term here. Traditionally, like, farmers have a deep understanding of their land, and they know which crops to grow and when to grow it and so on. But what becomes challenging is surveying this land over large areas becomes fairly complex. And what they are doing currently in countries like United States and in Switzerland and these kind of countries, what they are doing is the farmlands there are quite large. We are talking about hundreds of acres which farmers grow, and what they're doing is they have partnered with the image analytics companies. Like, one such company is IntelliSense. They've partnered with IntelliAir, sorry. They've partnered with these kind of precision agriculture companies which specialize in aerial imagery analytics. So what the analytics companies do is they send out some drones to survey that particular piece of land, and they leverage a combination of sensors, like say visible or NIR sensors, thermal cameras, and so on, capture images of these land, and finally they are able to run data analytics and observe trends to alert farmers on where weeds are growing or where pests are present and things like that. So there are a number of companies which are already doing something like this. Similarly, there's one more company called Gamaya in Switzerland, which uses drone based analytics for drone acquired data analytics for studying studying the pattern of agriculture. So now let's see another application. This is something that is being used in a number of oil companies. So this example comes from Baker Hughes. Anybody here could guess what this particular equipment is? Take a guess. Try to put it in the chat. There's no penalty for anything, any wrong answer. So if you're not aware where the chat window is, you can see three dots in your ribbon um, at the bottom. So you can go there and type, press on chat, and then you can communicate with us. So please feel free to use all this. So basically what this is a truck which is typically used in oil rigs. Okay, so this company uses this kind of pump that you see here. This is known as a positive displacement pump. These pumps are fairly what to say, expensive pumps, and it's a huge challenge for these industries to maintain these pumps. So typically what they do is they follow a predetermined schedule. Like, after these many hours of usage, you can run it for maintenance, similar to what you would do for your cars, for example, where you have a predetermined schedule. 1 lakh kilometers, do this type of maintenance. 10,000 kilometers, send it to service. This type of thing, right? So similarly in pumps also, in this company they used to follow a predetermined schedule, but that is not always ideal, because typically what happens is, when you're following a predetermined schedule, if a pump malfunctions prior to the schedule, it becomes expensive to call the engineer and get it repaired and so on. And also, if you reduce the time period for maintenance, it again becomes expensive, because you're going to maintain hundreds of pumps, right? The company is going to maintain hundreds of pumps. It becomes very expensive. So what they need is an algorithm to predict when this pump is going to fail. So this can be typically done again using machine learning. How they do it? They put sensors on these pumps, like vibration data. They collect that. They collect sound data. They collect various types of data, and then they can answer these kind of questions. That is my machine operating normally or not? This type of question is known as an anomaly detection. This answer is yes or no, binary classification. Alternately, they can also think about, why is my machine behaving abnormally? So you can understand whether is it a blockage in this inlet, or is it a blockage in the outlet, where in the pump do we have a malfunction. Even this can be predicted. This is known as condition monitoring. And one more thing that you can predict is, how much longer can I operate my machine, even though I know that it's not operating normally, but how much longer can I go on operating this. This is known as remaining useful life estimation. So typically, what happens is, the engineers who are working in places like these, typically mechanical engineers, electrical engineers perhaps, and these engineers, they are well versed with the domain knowledge. That is, how the pump works. They know all of this. But then getting a new data scientist who has a lot of knowledge in how acquiring data, processing it, and architecture, storing it somewhere, all this they are very well aware. Getting them on board becomes slightly difficult, because they will not be able to understand the domain knowledge. So what MathWorks does is, it equips engineers who have domain knowledge to get started with data analytics and AI very easily, because the user interface is fairly intuitive and easy for anyone to get started. Now, we were talking about machine learning, so let's see what are the categories of machine learning. Machine learning is broadly branched into two categories. One is supervised learning, and the second one is unsupervised learning. And in supervised learning, what we have is a data set which is labeled. So what we mean by labeled data set, so typically in supervised learning, we are using data set which has predetermined labels. That is, if you have, say for example, I was talking about the pump malfunction example, right? So you can collect all this vibration data. Similarly, you should also collect vibration data for a pump that is not functioning properly. So this is known as a label data set. So you have data set for, if the pump should function normally, what is the data set? If the pump should function abnormally, what is the data set? And then when you have a new data set, you can classify in either of these two. So that kind of technique is known as supervised learning. So you're building a predictive model based on both input and output data. And the categories of algorithms that exist in this are regression and classification. So there are two categories. In regression, what we have is basically, the output is not classified into predetermined classes. Regression can have any output, typically a numeric output. So say for example, a company wants to, our electrical company for example, like in Bangalore here we have Bescom, electricity board. So similarly, in your place, the electricity company, if they have the data with respect to what is the typical load that is required, that is being, like, what's the typical load that is being used by all the houses in that particular locality. If they have this data, it's very useful for them to know how much power needs to be generated. So what companies typically do is, they collect all this data, and they can also make a forecast regarding what tomorrow's load could be, or day after tomorrow's load could be, so they can plan it very well. So this kind of problem is known as a regression problem, and where you are making predictions and the output of the prediction is a numeric output. Alternately, classification problems will classify your output in one of the few determined classes. Say, for example, your smartwatch. You want to train your machine learning model to classify the data that is acquired by your smartwatch into these five categories: whether you're walking, whether you're climbing upstairs, whether you're sleeping, standing, or laying down, right? So if you have, these are predetermined classes. So depending on the data that you provide or data that is being collected by your smartwatch, the output lies in one of the five classes. So this is known as a classification problem. In unsupervised learning, however, your data is not labeled. That means you have some data set, and you must understand some internal representation from that input data only. So how that works is, I'll give you one example. There are techniques called clustering, which make use of a number of clustering algorithms to understand your data better. So this is, for example, data with respect to vehicle speed. So vehicle speed versus engine speed. So these are the two XY data that we've collected. And you've collected these n number of data points, and if you plot these data sets, this is how the data set looks like. That means at low engine speeds you have typically low vehicle speeds, but then you can also categorize them. They're falling into five distinct clusters. So based on your domain knowledge of how your how this car works, you can first, second, and third that was used to collect the data. So I've given sort of basic overview about what is machine learning, where it is used, typical examples of where it can be used, and some broad classifications in this space. At this point, does any of you have any questions about machine learning and what it is and whether it can be used in this application or not? Please put it in the chat. I'll be happy to see. I am not seeing any communication in the chat at all. Please send it to the hosts. Otherwise, you can unmute and ask me your questions.
Hi, ma'am.
Yes, go on. Hello, was somebody trying to talk to me? Please go on.
Now only joined the class, ma'am. Please explain, ma'am.
Now only you joined the class. Okay, so far what we were doing was we were talking about machine learning. We talked about AI first, what is AI, and somewhat a definition of AI. So let me just go very briefly, very quickly backwards, and say what we spoke until now. So we were talking about what we mean by AI today, and we were talking about how AI is being used to, or AI techniques are being used, or if the machine can, like, if you can train a machine to learn a specific behavior, it's broadly classified as an AI technique. So what are the techniques in AI? Typically, they are called machine learning, deep learning. They are very big buzzwords these days. So what exactly we are doing in that is we are, say, for example, feeding the data to a computer and also feeding the output. That means typical labels for the data, and the computer is able to write a model for you or derive a model. So that model could be called a machine learning model or a deep learning model. So basically, at the underbelly of this, we have just optimization techniques where we are trying to minimize the cost function. The cost function is the error prediction error based on the training data set or the test data set. So we were talking about typical applications of machine learning which are quite prevalent in say speech recognition. If you're using Android phone, you should have seen the OK Google. You can get some answers for your questions. So typically, these kind of applications in speech processing are, one way is they're being programmed is through machine learning. And also in autonomous driving world, we have a number of techniques like object recognition or path planning and motion detection and all these things which also use um, machine learning or deep learning. And we have many other applications. So irrespective of which discipline you come from, whether you're from ECE or computer science or IT or mechanical, agriculture, irrespective of where you come from, you can make use of these kind of techniques, the machine learning and deep learning techniques. And to formulate your problem, you need to understand when you should use machine learning. Can One thing you need to differentiate is whether the solution is simple enough, whether I can just write a program to do my task. In that case, you don't need machine learning. Say if you want to build an app which predicts whether an image has more pixels of red versus more pixels of green. This is a very simple problem. You don't need to use machine learning. You're going to complicate it by using machine learning. Alternately, if you're going to use if you have to predict between whether an image is a bird or an animal, it becomes a very complex problem, because the features that are going to define whether your image has a bird or whether your image has an animal are complex for the computer to understand. So that is where you will need to use techniques like machine learning. So machine learning is typically used when you have complex nonlinear relationships, and also when you want to update the model as and when you have newer and newer data that is coming in. And machine learning models can also scale very easily. So we were talking about two applications. One was in agriculture, where a number of companies which are using drones for surveying large areas of land, and then they are running analytics on these areas of land to predict whether there's pest in certain regions, or whether which regions need attention from the farmer. These kind of things can be predicted. And there are a number of companies. One such company is called Intel in Air. Similarly, there's one more company called Gamaya and so on, which are doing these kind of applications. In India, it's as of now, I think it is fairly low, but these are some applications which will eventually get picked up even in developing countries. One more example we talked about was in predictive maintenance, where we saw how machine learning can be applied in industrial setting, like a company which is say drilling oil. So typically they use these kind of pumps. These are called positive displacement pumps, and this company needs to analyze when this pump has to go under maintenance. So machine learning models come very handy here for these kind of applications, where you need to understand whether the pump is faulty or not, or if it is faulty, why it is faulty, and if it is faulty but I still want to use it because of the need, can I go on using it without affecting it too much? um, how long can I go on using it? So that's something that machine learning models can predict. So and then we saw what is machine learning, basically broadly classified into two topics: supervised learning and unsupervised learning, and we gave examples for each of these. So is everybody clear until here? Okay, I'm assuming that there are no more questions, and I'll go on. So typically, if you want to get started with machine learning, you have to think about a problem that you're going to solve, and say the problem here is to build the predictive maintenance model I just showed you. Like you have data for or you have a pump and you want to identify when that pump is going to fail, for example. What you need, the first thing you might need is your data set. So you need to collect your data set for faulty pump, for pump that is working well, and so on. This data set could be vibration data, it could be sound data, and number of such data. Sometimes this is for the predictive maintenance problem that I was just speaking about. But alternately, if you're working on image classification problems, you'll have to identify the right data set that you want to work with. Sometimes these data sets are present in some databases that you will have to extract from, or some sensors which are in real time streaming these. So you will have to collect the data first. Once you have the data, you will have to do some basic pre-processing. So typically the data that you collect could be noisy, it could contain outliers, it could contain blank data sets, and so on. You will have to clean it up. To clean it up, you will have to do some basic pre-processing techniques, and also following that, you will have to do something known as data transformation. So if you have to make more sense of your data, which of the predictors affect, or which of the parameters are most useful for predicting or for giving you a useful prediction, you'll have to identify that. For that, you will be doing something known as data transformation or feature extraction steps. Once you have this, you're going to feed these, you'll manually extract these features and you'll feed it into a model. Model is where you're going to specify an algorithm, and you're going to specify an optimization algorithm that you want to use, and then you'll have to like identify whether your optimization algorithm um, whether it's using the right parameters or hyperparameters. So for that, you will have to probably do a parameter optimization itself. So this becomes an optimization problem within an optimization problem, right? You'll have to sweep across the parameters to identify which are the right parameters that can give you the highest model accuracy. So you will have to check whether your model is accurate enough or not. If your model is not accurate, or it does not meet the accuracy standards that you need, you'll have to go back, you'll have to improve your data set, you'll have to change your pre-processing techniques, or change your feature extraction steps, and so on. And then again build your model and validate whether it is meeting your accuracy requirements or not. Now, if your model is meeting your accuracy requirements, the fourth step is to integrate your model into analytics. So, or integrate these analytics with any enterprise system, or a simple web app. Like you can build a desktop app or a web app where other people who don't need to worry about the code or the model itself can easily use it. So these are typically the 4 steps in the machine learning workflow. In each of these steps, there are a number of problems. Like when you're accessing and exploring data, sometimes your data can be very diverse. Sometimes it can come from sensors which are logging at, say, 1 second frequency, and some other sensors which are logging at, say, 1 minute frequency. These are unsynchronized. So you'll have to synchronize these. And this kind of these are just one type of problem. Sometimes you'll be working with very large data sets that cannot be stored on local drives. So this becomes a challenge. So there are a number of problems in each of these steps. In the second stage, when you're working with pre-processing, depending on the type of data that you have, you will have data specific pre-processing that you need to do. If it's an image data, you'll have to do a certain type of pre-processing. If it's speech data, certain other type of pre-processing, and so on. And in machine learning particularly, you will have to do these 2 steps where you have to manually extract the features and select them. That means, say for example, here we have a cup, right? Every cup has a handle. This is the feature of that cup or mug. So these are the features which you'll have to manually select and identify, which becomes very, very painstaking. The third thing is there are a number of models that are available. There are decision trees, there are support vector machines, number of models. So you will have to identify which model is more appropriate for your problem. So here you will have to identify the model and also tune that model so that you can get the right accuracy. This process itself becomes very computationally intensive. Maybe your 2 core or a 4 core CPU might take very long time to get that accuracy levels. In the fourth step, you have to think about the different types of end users, their proficiency level in using the um, machine learning model and so on. So when we talked about agriculture example, for example, farmers don't have an idea how to make use of machine learning models or how to make use of technology platforms to identify which areas in their farm they have some pests, for example. So it has to be very user friendly. You will have to build a front end for it, and you'll have to deploy it in a very user friendly manner. And sometimes this deployment process can you'll have to target various types of platforms. Like sometimes you are targeting, say, a mobile phone deployment, or sometimes a GPU based deployment. So depending on the target platform, you'll have to probably even rewrite your code depending on the platform of your choice. So I'll give you in a nutshell what machine learning does is once you load your data, pre-process it with various like filters or various algorithms and so on, you're building this machine learning model. Say if it's a supervised learning model, you're building a classification or regression model, and this is the model that you built. Now this model can be applied on a new data set. So typically your data set is going to be partitioned into a training data set and test data set. There are two different, like typically the partition is 70% you keep your data for training and 30% you don't touch it during the process of training, but 30% you're going to use it to validate your data, validate your model. So you're going to apply the model in this test data, and then you're going to see whether the prediction that comes out is accurate or not. MathWorks as a company is recognized in as a leader among the machine learning platforms. For example, this chart that you see here is uh, is a study that was conducted by Gartner. Gartner is a very good research and advisory firm which analyzes various companies in this machine learning space, and then they tell which companies are the front runners, which ones have good say ability to execute versus completeness of vision. So MathWorks is recognized here as a leader. So MATLAB is the software, MathWorks is the company that makes that software. So until now we spoke about machine learning, and we I'll give you an example of machine learning and deep learning shortly. I'll give a demo shortly. But before that, let us see what is deep learning. So far, we spoke about machine learning. What is deep learning? So, deep learning is a subset of machine learning, like you can see here. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and typically, deep learning has or works with neural networks. So it could be convolution neural networks or LSTM networks and various types of networks that we build in deep learning. And these networks have many hidden layers. In machine learning, what we did was we had a data set, we had to manually extract these features and then perform a classification task. For example, what are these features that we're talking about? Say we have a car here, a picture of a car. Now if you feed a picture of a car to a machine learning model, and it has to give you this type of output, like it has to differentiate it between truck, bicycle and so on. So what are the features that are very relevant that you can manually pick and feed it to the machine learning model? One thing is, say the car has 4 wheels as opposed to bicycle which has 2 wheels. And one more thing could be the size of the car or the aspect ratio of the car when compared to a truck, for example. These are the features that are very useful in in an algorithm for it to make, or for it to make decision on what this image is. Alternately, in deep learning, things are slightly different. So what happens in deep learning is, if you feed a large number of data sets, like if you show, if you're teaching a child, for example, if you're teaching a child to recognize what is a triangle, you will teach the child to look at the edges. Maybe if the triangle has three edges, this triangle typically has three edges, or square or rectangle typically have four edges. Now edges becomes the feature. So if you're manually teaching the child how to identify a triangle versus a rectangle, you will tell the child to learn and think about the features of that particular pattern, right? In Alternately, if you're going to show hundreds of images of triangles to the child and hundreds of images of square or rectangles to the child can automatically figure out the patterns, and it can automatically figure out what is a triangle versus what is a rectangle or square. So that is what deep learning does. You show a lot of images, you have a huge data set, and you're going to use this large data set to train a model automatically. So deep learning models, they learn directly from data. So if you have more data, you can build a better model. But what is the caveat for this? It's going to be very, very computationally intensive, because the model itself should identify the patterns from the data set. So this can work with very complex problems, like say for image classification, problems which don't require manually handcrafted features. So in those kind of problems, deep learning excels at it. This type of deep learning is also known as end-to-end learning, where we have both feature extraction and classification that will happen in one single step. So any questions so far? So I have some questions in the chat here. What is the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning? So AI is a very, you can consider AI as a discipline, and machine learning and deep learning are pillars which support AI. So AI is very large. AI is a tech, like, is a superset of techniques which combine machine learning and deep learning. Then we have questions on how AI and machine learning can impact our IT industry in India in near future. So I'll address that later on. And what you can learn, resources that you can learn, I'll address all of those later on. So far we were talking about machine learning and deep learning, and we spoke about in machine learning you do manual feature extraction, and in deep learning the neural networks can automatically extract features. So we'll discuss a little more detailed about neural networks in shortly. But before that, let's see what are the applications of deep learning. I hope this video is rendering fine. So this is an example. This is an image classification task. So what is happening here? One of our colleagues is using a video cam, webcam, and we are running a classification task. On the right hand side here, you can see that these bars, the green bars, they are the accuracy of prediction. So these are the top 5 classes in which this particular image is being classified into. So we are recognizing that this bottle is a beer bottle with, say, a X percentage of accuracy. This type of application is known as image classification. Similarly, here we are looking at, in this video, for example, we are looking at a road which is being classified in like green label, and you just saw that man just walked past, but he was not classified anything. Any any vehicles that are coming forward are being classified as blue labels. So this type of classification problems are known as are done using semantic segmentation. That means we are doing pixel wise image classification. Every pixel in this image, we are classifying it to fall in either blue, green, or other class, right? By doing this, we are able to classify what is the navigatable path for a self-driving car, and also what are the moving objects. Now, what are the typical applications of deep learning? One more application here is object detection. Object detection, where we are identifying which are the cars on this road and what is the percentage accuracy or probability of identifying this image as a car, this portion of this image as a car. Now, one question, anybody thinking, what is the difference between image classification and object detection? In image classification, what we are doing an entire image and we are giving a label for that image. Like this entire image has a backpack or has a phone or has a beer bottle. That's what we did with image classification. It was one entire image. The output was the image class, right? So here we saw that in the past. So I'll just run this video again so you can see an entire image is being classified into one category, one of the 5 categories. This is image classification. Alternately, in object detection, however, we are taking in an entire image, but we are able to localize to that region where the object is present. So this is known as object detection. So where can deep learning be used? Not only on images, you can also use deep learning for text. For example, in Gmail, you can autocomplete emails. These kind of applications also, deep learning can be very useful. Similarly, in stock market prediction, deep learning is used, or in speech processing, and so on. Let me show you one line, one demo on how we can do deep learning in using just 5 lines of code. So what I have here is I have open MATLAB. I hope everybody is familiar with MATLAB. If not, please put it in the chat. Okay, this is the interface of MATLAB, and in MATLAB we have a toolbar here. This toolbar, which consists of these few tabs, and in MATLAB, this window is known as the editor window. And there are two types of editors. One is live editor and normal script window. And then here we have a command window. Command window does basic um, line by line processing. Like for example, if I have to create a variable a which stores the value of 2 plus 3, for example, you can see that kind of computation is done. And here on in the left hand side bottom here, I have a workspace window. So this workspace window stores this value. It's like temporary memory. So you can now if I call a, it can automatically pick it up from the workspace because that value has been stored. So similarly, I can do some basic processing like what is sine of pi and so on. Here pi is taken in radians. So we are getting another output. Now, let me show you an example of how to use or how to use deep learning for making a prediction in just 5 lines of code. So what we are doing here is we are going to use a pre-trained network. So AlexNet is a pre-trained network. We're going to use that to make predictions on images. So here we are looking at AlexNet. AlexNet was built and trained by a guy called Alex from University of Toronto. Um, to get AlexNet into MATLAB, you can go to Home, go to Add-ons, and then you can download something known as AlexNet support package for AlexNet. So AlexNet was trained on something known as an ImageNet dataset. So ImageNet dataset is nothing but a, a number of images, like millions of images, which were classified into 1,000 different categories. So let me show you what AlexNet is. So here in just one line code, I can access a pre-trained network called AlexNet. So I have opened this AlexNet. AlexNet is a series network. Series network means one input connected to the next output, right? One input, one output throughout. So AlexNet has 25 layers here. What you need to know is just this much. Typically, CNNs have one input layer, n number of hidden layers, and one output layer. So what each of these layers do, these convolution, ReLU, pooling, and so on, it becomes, we can, we need not discuss that today because we don't have that much time. We can basically, what they're doing is they're doing the feature extraction steps. These are mathematical operations which are doing the feature extraction steps. And then finally, your fully connected layer is going to map your features to the 1,000 classes. And finally, you have a classification output. So in the classification output, I'm going to show you what are these 1,000 classes that AlexNet is trained on. For example, here, AlexNet was typically trained on a number of fishes and birds and reptiles and so on. So you can see, and some everyday objects as well. We have 1,000 classes that AlexNet was trained on. So you can see here. So we are going to use this AlexNet. We're going to use this pre-trained network AlexNet to make a prediction of or classify an image of a peacock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load an image of peacock. This is peacock.jpg, as you can see here. And let me show you, sorry, let me show you how the image of a peacock looks like. So to access this image, I'm going to use this command known as imshow, and then I'll show this image of a peacock. So this is the image of a peacock we are going to classify. So we have this image of peacock and we are going to use AlexNet, which is a pre-trained network which can classify peacock versus many other um, birds, reptiles, and so on. So we are going to use that AlexNet to classify this peacock. So here we are, how do we classify? First thing we need is the network itself. So we are going to load AlexNet like this in just one line of code. Net is equal to AlexNet. We have loaded it, and we've sort of explored what it contains by double clicking on the workspace and observing what the layers are. So pay attention to this input layer. So input layer here specifies a property for the input size of the image. Input size of the image that is required for any form of classification to take place is 227 by 227 by 3 for AlexNet. So we loaded one image of a peacock. Let's see whether this image of peacock is appropriate size. So this particular line of code, which is IM, this is the size of that image, 792 by 1056. So obviously we cannot use this size of image, right? We have to resize it. So in MATLAB, to resize an image, you're going to use a command known as im resize. And then we are feeding this image that we just loaded, im, and then we are going to resize it to 227 by 227 size. And here you can observe that we have created a new image im resized, which is 227 by 227. So let me show what im resized looks like. So I'm using the IMShow command in the command window to show what IM resized looks like. So you can see this image is much smaller, right? Because we've resized a large image, which was 792 by 1056, to a smaller sized image. Now we have to use just one line. That is, you can use the function classify with and pass two input arguments. One is the network that you've just loaded, that is the net, and also the resized image. And the output of this particular command, we're going to store it in this variable known as label. So let's see what is the output. Label is the label here, it has been correctly identified as peacock. So this was the actual image, and a computer model was able to identify this image to be a peacock. So let me try this with another image. For example, I'm going to load this particular image, peppers.png. So let's see what the output of this particular image is going to be. So here you can see we have capsicum, garlic, and so on, right? Tomato and so on. So what AlexNet did here was it took in this entire image and it gave you the most likeliest class. So it could identify capsicum as bell pepper, that's what it's called in the US, but it wasn't able to identify this image as, say, garlic or tomato and so on, right? So because this is an image classification problem, we couldn't identify all the objects that are present in this image, but we could identify one most likely class which can best represent this image. So any AI model that you're building is not going to be omnipotent, in the sense it cannot tell you what all objects are present here and what accuracies and so on, unless you've built it in that manner. If you frame this as an object detection problem, then maybe we can classify and localize what each of these images are, each of these objects in the image are. So any questions so far? Is everybody able to follow me? Can you please type in a yes or no in the chat? So participants, please type in a yes or a no in the chat. If you're able to follow me, type yes. If you're not able to follow me, type no. Thank you, Kavi Priya and Manoj. Thank you very much. So I think more or less people are able to follow me. So let us continue. So what we saw here was how to use a pre-trained network. Pre-trained network like AlexNet. So we are getting some questions. Are keywords like IMShow specific for MATLAB? Yes. So these keywords like IMRead and IMShow, for example, these are all specific for MATLAB. So you have some people are asking whether you can use internet for data. I don't know what exactly you mean by this question, but if you want to use an image from the internet to perform this image classification task, yes, that is possible. So if you want me to give you a demo of this, let's try that. I'm going to download an image of, for example, from the internet, and let's see if AlexNet is able to classify this properly or not. So which ones do you like? Let's pick this one. and I'm going to save this image in my download folder perhaps, and then move it to the current folder. So I'm going to leave this as download.jpg. The file name doesn't matter, so I'm going to leave it there. And then I have to move it to the current folder. So let me just cut that and paste it somewhere. So the current folder tab is over here. So let's paste that image over here. So I have this download.jpg image that I just downloaded of a monkey. So let's see if I can if this model can identify what this image is. So I'm going to write the name download.jpg as it is. It will be able to identify that because it's in the same current folder. So you will have to make sure that your image is in the correct folder. And then let's see. So this is the image of the monkey which is downloaded, and AlexNet was able to identify even the it has identified this particular monkey as a macaque, right? Macaque is one type of monkey which has a type of different type of face. So absolutely, AlexNet was able to download, like it could identify an image from the internet. As long as you have an image, it doesn't matter where the image comes from. What matters, however, is whether your AlexNet has that particular image in its 1,000 classes. So say if your face, for example, is not trained in AlexNet, so it doesn't know. If you put your face, it won't know who you are. But you can use AlexNet to train your own network, which can identify you from your friends and so on. So what we learned so far was how to train or how to use a pre-trained network. Pre-trained network means somebody else has trained the network, and then we are going to use that trained deep learning model to make a prediction. If you had to build your own network, you will have to again start with the 4-step workflow. The workflow goes like this, where you access and explore data. The data can come from files, databases, sensors, as we discussed previously. And the second step would be to pre-process the data. So when we talk about pre-processing, sometimes you'll have to do some form of basic pre-processing, like resizing the images or augmenting the images and things like that. And depending on the type of problem, if you're working on, say, a semantic segmentation problem, you will have to do label wise. You'll have to label the data set, like each of the cars here are labeled, this purple color label, the blue color label for the road, yellow color label for the sky, and so on. These kind of labels which have to be manually labeled is going to be very, very time consuming. Then you'll have to import a reference model. One such reference model is AlexNet. It's already built. Similar to AlexNet, you have number of pre-trained like GoogleNet and VGG16 and so on. There are a number of models like AlexNet which are already available in MATLAB. Then you can develop your own predictive model by taking inspiration from the model that you just imported, and probably you can modify the imported model. And if you're going to train your model, you'll have to use complex hardware like GPUs or GPU clusters to train your model in a reasonable time. So typically training model can go on until weeks or months together, depending on the complexity of the problem, the size of your data set, and all that. Now, the model that you tuned or trained cannot be 100 or cannot give you a good accuracy at the first step itself. So you will have to do something known as hyperparameter tuning, where you will have to adjust your parameters for training itself. So in this again, you'll have to change the settings and go back to training. It might again take weeks to months to complete the training. So depending on the hardware that you have, if you have good number of GPUs or GPU clusters, you can reduce the time required for training. Then you can visualize. There are in MATLAB you have tools to visualize your networks, and finally you can validate whether your the deep learning model that you built is going to give you good accuracy or not. And then you can finally, if you have good accuracy, you can go and deploy it as a desktop app, or you can deploy it on a GPU card which can go into your self-driving car, for example. So MATLAB provides the capability for automatic code generation, which means you can use a software to automatically convert MATLAB code into C, C++ code, or CUDA code, and number of other languages, or HDL code and so on, which can for target specific deployment. And all these steps, all the way from accessing to integrating, can be done in one platform, that is MATLAB. So there are two ways you can typically build your own network. So either you can build and train your own network from scratch, like how AlexNet was built, or you can use a network like AlexNet and fine tune it to suit your application. This is known as transfer learning. So there are specific ways you can understand where to use what. This graph provides you an understanding of that. Pre-trained network like AlexNet, with low effort you can make use of AlexNet because it's already trained. You don't need to train it and so on. You can make use of AlexNet for doing basic predictions, right? We saw Monkey how to predict it. But what if you wanted to predict, say, masala dosa from idlis and so on? AlexNet won't work because it doesn't know what is masala dosa or idli. It has not been trained on it. It doesn't work. So in such cases, what you can do is you can either build a network and train it from scratch. Like you can build your own network, curate your own data set of, say, 1,000 images of masala dosas, 1,000 images of idlis, 1,000 images of various other Indian breakfasts, and you can build your own network to identify these images. That is known as training from scratch. It's going to be a lot of effort for training your model, but it can offer you very good flexibility. So if you want to add another data set, or it's very like application specific for your own application. Alternately, what you can do is you can make use of AlexNet, but you're going to tweak it. You're going to tweak the final classes, or you're going to tweak it to adopt AlexNet to work for you. That is known as transfer learning. The effort required in training is much lesser, whereas the flexibility that it offers is much larger than the pre-trained network. So AI is growing very rapidly. Where is it being used? Nowadays, a lot of industries are adopting AI for various applications, like Shell, for example, which used AI for machinery identification and also for satellite terrain recognition and so on. And this particular company, Genentech, one of the foremost biotech companies in the world, has used AI for pathology detection, like identifying which is the cancer tissue versus which one is not. So these kind of applications are quite prevalent in the medical image analytics space. And Veoneer is a self-driving autonomous driving company which has used MATLAB to do lidar based object detection. Similarly, number of manufacturing companies, this one particularly, Musashi Seimitsu, it's a Japanese company which makes gears and bearings and so on. They have used MATLAB to identify whether there were abnormalities in their auto parts. Similarly, we see a lot of applications of AI in the medical image space of CT scans or MRI scans, images, plain plain old pathology or biopsy images, and we have various techniques, especially in the medical space, number of applications for using AI. So when we were talking about building your own deep neural networks, we talked about models. So where can you access pre-trained models? Many models are inbuilt into MATLAB, and you can access them if they are in other platforms like say PyTorch or TensorFlow or Caffe. They can be imported into MATLAB. So typically, deep learning models are being built in a number of open source platforms like TensorFlow, PyTorch, MXNet. All these platforms are supported by one major internet companies, and these platforms all communicate with each other through a platform called ONNX, which stands for Open Neural Network Exchange. So MATLAB is a partner with ONNX where it can exchange models and also interoperate with various other platforms. So we have direct importers for Keras and Caffe, and other importers work through the ONNX mechanism. Typically, when you're working with deep learning, you'll have or you'll need a lot of data. So sometimes problems happen when your data set is quite limited. Say, for example, you're working with medical images, you might have very few cancer images as opposed to as many normal tissues, right? In such cases, when you're working with limited data sets, you will have to make use of as much information that is available in a particular image as it's possible. So you can make use of one image, you can rotate it, you can reflect it, shear it, and so on to synthesize data sets. This is known as augmentation. You can do that using a tool known as image data augmenter. If you have one image, you can make around 6 or 7 or more images using these tools by just performing basic functions like resizing, cropping, and things like that. Sometimes labeling the data itself is a very big challenge. So when we saw the data set, like where we saw green being labeled for road and blue being labeled for cars, how do we label something like that? So MATLAB provides you a tool known as Image Labeler app, which can perform labeling task. For example, here we are loading all these images and we are going to label these one by one. So you can see how this works. We've labeled this image. You can create a label. The label can be either rectangle if you're doing an object detection, or it can be a pixel label if you want to choose pixel by pixel. It can be a pixel label. Let's see how pixel by pixel we can choose and label the objects in this image, like the car, the pedestrian, and so on. So you can zoom in this region. Here we are zooming in, and then we are going to label this particular part of the image pixel by pixel to choose what this particular object is. That person is a pedestrian. Now you can choose vehicle and label all the vehicles in this image. So these tools are very useful if you can say, I just showed an example of Genentech, which used semantic segmentation approach for labeling their biopsy data set, right? You can choose pixel by pixel which region of the tissue is cancer, for example. So for that, we have tools like these which can help you do this. Now, when you're working with deep learning, you'll have to train your deep learning models, and to train them, you will have to work with, say, GPUs or cloud resources and so on. And within MATLAB, you can target various resources using just one line change the execution environment. You'll be able to target them. Now, when you're going to deployment, you'll have to perhaps deploy your MATLAB deep learning model on Android phone or a Raspberry Pi and so on. So to do this deployment process, you'll have to target that particular vendor specific um, hardware, right? To do that, you can use our coder products known as GPU coder or MATLAB coder. It can convert MATLAB language into CUDA for NVIDIA or C++ for CPU. So it can automatically translate from MATLAB to CUDA or C++. So there are a number of training resources. We couldn't cover too much in depth about machine learning and deep learning today. In just 2 hours, it's not possible. We have, however, a number of training resources like machine learning on ramp and deep learning on ramp, which are available. If we can put it on the chat, Vinay, please could you help put these links on the chat? They are free courses which are online. You don't need to install MATLAB to take these courses. They're all completely available online. They have a number of video tutorials, hands-on exercises, and so on. And at the end of the course, you can also download a certificate of completion, which you can put on your LinkedIn and other platforms. So please make use of these resources to get started. Alternately, we have a Coursera course called Practical Data Science with MATLAB, and we also have a courseware page on deep learning. So you can go to that matlabacademy.mathworks.com, a link that has been shared, and you can find all these courses which are free and openly available to everybody. So MathWorks is seen as a partner for undergraduate educational institutions as well as research universities and industry. So undergraduate students who are using MATLAB, who go on to research universities for their higher studies, or they go on to industry, the central tool that is being used in a number of industry segments is MATLAB. So MATLAB and Simulink are tools which are used in almost all industries these days. All the automotive companies, all the aerospace and defense companies are making use of MATLAB and Simulink. For example, Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, or Hyundai, Maruti Suzuki, Honda, all of these are our customers. So irrespective of where you will get hired, you will end up using these tools. So it's good to get started right at your undergraduate age to make yourself familiar with the tools, so that when you are going to the industry, you can directly make use of your skills and be ready to use to work on different types of problems. But the tool that is being used is MATLAB. So MathWorks itself is a company which is 35 years old, and we have about 5,000 members staff. Like what you can see here, all the developers, all the engineers within MathWorks, and we are available on a number of social media platforms. So please reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you want to know more about MathWorks products or any other training resources and so on. There is a form here which has been circulated, a feedback form that is circulated. So it would be great if you can fill out that feedback form. Meanwhile, I can take questions. If you have any questions on AI and its applications, or machine learning and deep learning, or any specific questions that you have, we can take it now.
Hey, hi, Spandana. Can I just add for a moment? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Thanks. So thank you very much. Thanks to all the 26 people who have filled out the feedback form. I would request all the others, everyone who is present in this meeting, to kindly fill the feedback form. This will help us to know what you are exactly interested in and other things. Thank you very much. Please fill the feedback form for us. Thank you.
Students, you can unmute and have a word. Say your doubts. Indeed, it was a very good session. I really liked it. All the case studies exhibited was really good. Thank you, really, Spandana, for that.
Thank you very much, ma'am. If there are, I saw some questions previously, so I'll try answering those
Yeah.
first. And
Mm.
let's see. What are neural networks? Can we explain a bit more on neural networks? So just give me a moment while I can bring up the resources which can best explain that. So this was, let me just try to explain neural networks using these few slides that I have. So neural network architecture, typically what we have in neural networks are these known as neurons, and each of these neurons, the information flows from one neuron to the other. And the first layer in a neural network is known as an input layer. Next layer is known as an output layer, and in between we have a number of hidden layers. Now, from one node to another, number of the information the information flows from one layer to another in terms of the weights for that particular layer and biases for each of these and so on. You don't need to worry too much about it. But what happens typically in a neural network when the neural network sees one image is that the first few layers, what they're doing is they are scanning this image. Imagine that this window is sliding from left to right, and it's picking up all the features that are particular to the fish, for example. It's going to pick up what are the typical features of a fish. This particular fish has orangish reddish color, so color is one feature. Has an eye, so one eye or how many ever eyes that the image has, so that is one feature. The texture, the patterns, the sharpness, the contrast, all these are the features which are going to be picked up, and iteratively the model learns patterns from these images. And there is a specific function for each of these layers within the neural network. They have various names like this: convolution, ReLU, pooling. These are the names of the layers, but essentially what they're doing is convolution layers learns for patterns, pooling layers downsample the downsample the matrix. So these are all matrices, of course. So pooling layer pull everything. Why we cannot work with such a big convolution layer throughout? As you can see from left to right, we are seeing that the size is somewhat shrinking, right? Size is shrinking and shrinking. So we are going to retain the most important information, and we are going to discard the rest, because you're running an optimization problem, and this optimization problem for, say, in AlexNet, which has 25 layers, is an optimization problem of 22 million parameters. So when you're going to run an optimization problem with such a large number of parameters, you will need a lot of compute resources. You will need a supercomputer to run that problem. So we are going to reduce the number of parameters to retain only the most important information and discard the rest. And then finally, we are going to have an output layer which is going to map the essential patterns that have been observed to the output classes. So this is what is happening at the back end of the convolution neural network. Any other questions? Am I audible? Is everyone able to hear me?
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Okay. Then we have another question which has come out: is the next arms race for AI weapons? Very interesting question. Also a website known as AI for Good. A lot of companies, particularly I think Elon Musk and other people who are funding this, that AI technology should not be used for bad purposes, or purposes which compromise on human safety and security and privacy and things like that. So there is A lot of research that is going on into how AI technologies are being used, and a number of people, especially I showed you one example of object detection, if you remember, where we can localize the region where cars are present. So a person who built that object recognition algorithm called YOLO actually resigned working on any more AI problems because he assumed, or he felt, that there are a lot of applications that are being explored which are contradictory to the applications that these technologies were developed for. So there's a lot of research going on into how one can limit the applications of AI to not compromise on security, safety, and privacy of human beings. Yes, there is good and bad side to these things. If you're able to build technologies which can accurately identify where where a person is, what a person looks like, what they eat every day, what they do every day, what they watch every day, then pretty much the companies which have this kind of data is are going perhaps they should not misuse it for any other applications, but they can. So this is something that many people are looking at to limit the usage of AI for various negative applications. That's why in the new age they call data is the new oil. So previously countries which have oil became very very rich, right? Similarly, the companies these days which have lots of data, for example Facebook, Google, they have tremendous amount of data about you. Amazon, all these are companies which have lots and lots of data. So the data that you give them can be used for their discretion. So as individuals we should make sure that
Companies, ma'am.
we share only the necessary amount of data. Yes, sorry, I heard that somebody was trying to speak. Okay, I cannot hear if somebody was trying to speak. So you can look up on this, read more about it, and of course build applications which are good for the world. So I'm going to share one link on this AI for Good Foundation. Um, you can take a look at that if you want to know more about how AI is being used and what projects are being done and so on. Any other questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask the questions. I would again request all to fill your interest areas. Thank you.
Kirtika.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it was nice, Spandana, and when I like you gave a good composite full of like wonderful complete session. It was very nice, and also on the neural network there was an added thing because of the question coming up. Thanks to the student who have asked that question also, and the resource links that are shared is also good. I'll share it across to entire student list. I will definitely do that. Thank you. And it is really nice. Thank you. I'm looking forward to join you at 3:30.
Thank you
Yes.
very much, ma'am. If any of the
Kritika.
participants have any questions or any of you have any questions, please reach out to us at these email IDs. We'll share the email ID in the chat as well. So please feel free to drop us a note. Tell us what you're doing, how you can use AI in your own projects. We can have a chat.
Wonderful.
We can brainstorm and we can discuss on how you can use AI.
Actually, I pulled in Vinay and Spandana. I pulled in all the third years. The
Okay.
reason was they'll be able to take up their projects in the
Yes.
AI. Let them be interested for. That was the main reason that I pulled in almost all the departments I hear. Biomedical, biotech only I have not written. Aeronautical, everybody I pulled in here. So they can have an idea of, they can get at least 1 or 2 projects can come up in AI with MATLAB. That was the intention behind this entire process of association. Let's keep fingers crossed and expect students to get into it.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Over,
giving us an opportunity to be
yeah.
here and interact with your students.
Over to Kirtika ma'am for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Spandana, for the wonderful session, and the presentation was really informative. Our students can able to know more about AI, machine learning, and its types, where MI is used, and also you explained more about deep learning and its application, how to work on MathWorks, etc. You gave answers for the students' question. Thank you so much. In this occasion, a special thanks to Dr. K. Mahalakshmi Ma'am, Dean KITC IIII, for organizing this webinar. I also wish to express my gratitude to our management, principal, vice principal, deans and HODs of various department, faculty friends, students for supporting us. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the 3:30 session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much,
Thank you.
Professor
Yeah.
Mahalakshmi. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Professor Kirtika. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, Spandana.
Bye,
Thank you
ma'am.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spandana. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.